Hello and welcome to episode number 8 of Let's Be Nerds. I'm your host, Stephen J, and today we have a pretty exciting topic because without books, could we really call ourselves nerds? Gordon, Lizette, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing pretty good this morning. How are you guys?
I'm excited for this episode because,
Me
as
too.
you guys know, I'm a big book nerd specifically. So,
See, we're playing to our strong suits here. You know, we got our video game episode down, we're getting books down. We're gonna do another conspiracy episode after this. I really I like that we kind of get to touch on all these different realms of nerddom, so to speak.
Definitely. It lets us talk about whatever we want, whenever we want, and we can pretty much make it fit into whatever subject we need it to.
Exactly. So, with that being said, I'm going to kick us off, and we're gonna dive into our very first book.
I'm just over here snacking on some candy corn.
Ugh.
how do you have candy corn this? Never mind. I work at Walgreens. I know it's already out on the shelf. Let me not even finish
Yep.
that sentence.
Yeah. I the Family Dollar by my house. I talked to one of the I guess manager level people there, and they can
Mm-hmm.
get fired if they do not have the stuff out like 2 months in advance.
That's gross.
Like
Oh,
if they don't have the Christmas shit out the second Halloween, like the week after Halloween ends, they could lose their job.
no,
And I
you're
wish I was
not.
lying.
It's not that strict at Walgreens, but it is like, get this done or we're going to have words.
Mm.
And those words may or may not involve you
They
voluntarily putting in a 2 week notice.
I mean, they might. I always got my shit done in time, so I didn't have to worry about it.
I'm not trying to find that one out the hard way.
Nah.
Whenever you hit it big on the podcast, you can.
Okay. It's a plan.
Gordon, why don't you tell us about your book series?
Ah, gladly. This my book series is a bit more sci-fi, as I think looking at my bookshelf, every single book series or standalone is all science fiction, ranging from Harry Potter to Goosebumps to a bunch of other stuff that you guys probably never heard of. So, to the book I'm going over today, or book series, it's called Michael Vey, and it's by Richard Paul Evans. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's
I've
a
seen that.
very sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say I've seen that series again on the shelves at the bookstore, and it was another one that looked interesting, but I never picked up.
Well, there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this because I don't know how to talk about a book without spoiling it. But the this is a 7 book series, and well, only 7 right now. He released about a month ago. I was on Facebook before work, just hopped on one of his live streams, and he put out probably what's made me the most excited for a new book in forever, saying that he's going to release 3 more books in this series to give us more background information on some of the characters that are brought up, but not exactly gone into. Because this whole book is based around 17 kids and their unfortunate circumstance at birth, so to speak. The main bad guys in the book are called the Elgen, and they made this new and improved MRI device, called the MRE. And when they put it into their trial phases, it killed 90% of the babies in the hospital, but left 17 alive and gave them electrical powers, which sounds fucking awesome. Like, this is probably the one book series I want to see in um turn into a movie, but I know they would never be able to do it justice, just like the Harry Potter series. But that's a
What?
tale
What do
for
you?
another time.
Are you like slandering the Harry Potter films? And you're stick to one lane here, kid. Don't be slandering the Harry
Am
Potter
I
stuff.
wrong? I am not wrong.
Okay, listen. Just continue with your. We're not. This isn't a debate, Gordon.
Yeah, it's gonna turn into one. So, to the best of my knowledge, is only 16 electrical, or sorry, I think there's only 14 electrical kids found up to the 17th, or sorry, the 7th book called The Final Spark. And each kid has its own unique powers. The main character, Michael Vey, his power is the ability to shock people, kind of like you can do if you rub your feet on a carpet with socks on and shock someone. That's basically his powers. Just if he were to shock you, you would die. If he were to use his full power. He can also shock through conductive metals and stuff like that. And he's kind of like the overpowered character in the book, as his electricity or power is always increasing throughout his books, which is kind of like a comic. Then there's the twins in the series, Taylor Ridley and Tara Ridley. Their powers focus more on the brain and what they're able to do to your brain. Taylor, for example, can scramble your synapses in the brain, causing confusion. And she can also read your mind while touching. And it can only through physical contact can she read your mind, unless there is a lot of like open electricity around, like kind of like if she were to stand next to like a Tesla coil in a Faraday cage, she'd be able to read the minds of people around her. But there has to be a lot of electricity flowing through the air for that to happen.
Okay.
On her, no, I can't say better half because Tara's a complete and utter. She's through the most of the series is the bad guy, one of the many bad guys in the series. She's able to disrupt the electronic functions in your brain. And with her years of refining her powers under the control of the Elgen, which are the main bad guys again, she's able to target the parts of your brain that create fear, joy, misery, happiness, and she's able to make you feel things like, what's your guys' biggest fears?
Well, holy shit.
Yeah, this is not a question I was expecting, okay?
Okay, sorry, not biggest fear. What's something you fear a lot?
Hosting a weekly podcast with you.
Okay. She can make you feel that at any point in time.
Like say eternal dread. I got it.
Say you hate spiders crawling all over you. She can make it feel like there are spiders crawling all over you and that they're just not there. And she can also make you see them. Her powers really mess with your brain and are just messed up.
So like an electric scarecrow from Batman.
Yeah, but she's cooler.
Of course.
With those two gone, Abigail, one of the good guys, she has the ability to temporarily ease or stop pain by electrically stimulating parts of your brain, but she can only do so while touching. She can't do it from a distance, and it doesn't heal you. It just makes your brain think that there is no pain there so that you're more comfortable, which is kind of messed up in more than one way. Oh, you're dying here. You don't feel like you're dying, but you're still not going to be alive for much longer.
So she's like electric hospice.
Exactly.
Okay.
To put it in a really messed up way.
Well, I mean, I'm so lost. I'm sorry, I'm lost right now. Like I don't
Why? How could you be lost with these beautiful explanations?
Okay, so let me just backtrack for my sake and probably the listeners. So MRIs were changed to MREs, which
They
I
created
was
a new device called
uh,
like the MRE, MER, or MEI. I don't remember exactly.
because
They only meant
MREs in my world are meals ready to eat.
Ready
The
to
meal
eat. Yep.
yeah,
so like
no.
so that threw me off a little bit. But so essentially this villainous organization, the Elgin, caused
Yes.
this, and now they're going back and they're trying to kill these electrical power based kids.
No, see what I guess I could have explained that better. You are right. The Elgin's goal throughout this entire series is to gather the kids. They try to do such at a young age, but the last two, Michael and Taylor, were the last two kids to be found, were around in their ninth grade year, so around 13 years old, right? 13 or 14, something like that. And they wanted to bring them all together, train them to be, in no better way to say it, ruthless killers, kind of,
Mm,
to take over the world. And they are trying to fix their machine so it didn't kill babies, but made a new generation of electrical youth
oh,
to be the
okay,
next step in humanity's evolution.
okay. Now I'm following.
And while on the Elgin, they wanted to take over the world, but you can't do that easily. You need to be able to control something that everyone needs. And so how they did this was by putting up power plants all over the world, or attempting to put power plants all over the world.
Okay.
Now these power plants were controlled by electric rats. Yes,
Okay.
I know how stupid that sounds, and they call these plants star source plants to try to make people think that they harness cold fusion as a safe way to produce electricity. And what they were doing with these electric rats was putting millions of them into this giant copper bowl, conducting their electricity, and powering whole countries for the fraction of the price it costs to run your home, pretty much.
Okay.
Trying to get people dependent on them switched over to them so that they can be able to start charging money for it and essentially rule the world by controlling electricity, which, if you control the electricity, you pretty much control the world.
I got you. So they're creating a dependence and then planning to create a scenario where they can essentially harness the dependency to control the population with
Yes,
these
and
electric rats and electric kids.
yes, and their goal is to put the original 17 electric kids in a position of power to rule over the world, which, as every good book goes, by the end of the series so far, isn't really working out.
Okay.
Does that clear things up a
Kind
little
of.
bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any questions? Because I can go into more detail on anything you don't fully understand.
No, I think I'm on track now.
Yeah, me
Okay,
too.
so a little recap. Michael's able to, I guess I missed something on his. He's able to also absorb electricity from external power sources. So anything that creates electricity, he can absorb and increase his own power. And he's the only one out of the 17 that are able to do this,
Okay.
which is why he is the main protagonist and the biggest pain in the butt towards the Elgen, or as I think he's called in the final book, Admiral General Hatch, which is the ruler of the Elgen, so to speak.
Wait, so he's on the
He's on the good guy. Michael's on the good guy side, trying to beat up the Elgin
from
because they
like the
kidnapped his
inside,
mother.
but he has a rank within the Elgin.
No,
Okay, so say that part again. Who's the admiral or general?
um, the leader of the Elgin, who goes by the title Admiral General Hatch.
Oh, I'm okay. That's
Oh,
another.
okay, okay,
I
okay.
thought you meant that was his like rank or title. You're saying that's the leader of the. Okay, I
That's
gotcha.
the leader of the Elgin, yes. Sorry, I jump around a lot while explaining books, and that's a bad habit.
It's all good.
But he Hatch, because I'm not fucking referring to him as that every single time I say his name, had found all the kids up until Michael and Taylor, which there are 17 in total, and I'll go over the rest of their powers in a minute. But a little backstory I think is necessary. He goes to kidnap Michael and Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
He kidnaps Taylor and starts treating her as if she is one in a kind. What she is, she has electrical powers. And he starts buying her things like, or sends her and her twin out to buy things in essentially Hollywood. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that square is in there, but pretty much like where any person would want to go shopping if they had all the money in the world. And was trying to groom her into submission to use her powers for bad instead of good.
Okay.
And now, while able to steal or kidnap Taylor, when he went to kidnap Michael, he was unable to and kidnapped his mother, which led Michael and his friend Austin to go and Pasadena, California, which is where the headquarters was at the time, to go save his mother, who wasn't there, who then ended up being in Peru. They traveled to Peru to save her, and they travel all over the world trying to stop the Elgin and save his mother, which is the theme for the first couple books.
Okay.
But when they hit the Pasadena facility, they meet the rest of the Electric Kids.
Mm-hmm.
Or most of them, because some of them are quote unquote dead. And by dead to the Elgin, they are of no use and have either been systematically put into the ground or released if their powers are not harmful to cannot compromise the Elgin. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
But when they're at the Pasadena facility, they meet. I'll just name them off real quick. They meet Brian, Grace, Ian, Kylie, McKenna, Nichelle, Quentin, and Zeus. All of which these kids all have their own special electrical power. Oh, you guys are gonna be sick and tired of me by the time I'm done.
No,
I,
I'm just.
I'm just, yeah, I'm just trying to focus, keep track of everything.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot. So Brian's power allows him to focus electricity that allows him to cut through objects, especially metal. And that's pretty much the extent of his power. Nothing cool or amazing, but could get you out of a tight bind if you somehow ended up in jail.
Okay.
Grace is a human flash drive. She could touch your computer and download all the files into her just like you would a flash drive with a seeming unlimited storage, which there probably is a limit. There just hasn't been one found yet in the books. Which Grace turns to the good side at the end of book 1 and downloads all the Elgin's information, which helps the good guys eventually beat the bad guys.
Okay.
Next person up would be Ian. He is blind, but he can see by using electric location. and is able to see through any objects with this ability. Up to, like, I think without his powers being amplified, he's able to see up to a mile or two.
Okay.
With this unobstructed, can look through anything. Pretty cool power,
I'd say.
Then we have Kylie. Kylie's power is to pretty much be a magnet. She can stick to metal objects. She can attract metal objects that are lighter than her. If it's heavier than her, she drags herself towards the electrical objects. And pretty useless power. In my opinion, that's probably the most useless one of them all. Right behind electric flash drive, or human flash drive. McKenna's next. Her ability is to create light and heat to the point where she can heat herself up to over 3,000 Kelvin. And she has gotten, in the books, hotter than the sun itself, which leaves her extremely dehydrated. So it's not without its drawbacks. So for every time she uses her powers, she has to drink an excessive amount of water because of the amount of heat she generates.
Okay.
So a good way to nerf that. Next up is Quentin. Quentin is the embodiment, well, kind of the embodiment of an EMP. But there's someone else that fits that description better, I guess. But his ability is to isolate electric magnetic pulses, which he can with precision take out small, like, say he's like 20 yards away, he could take out the function that my mouse uses to, like, he could fry the electrical circuits in my mouse I use on my computer from a decent bit away with extreme accuracy.
Okay.
Next up is Torsten. No, sorry, Zeus. Zeus is the next one up. And as the name would suggest, he has the ability to throw lightning/electricity from his body, just like the Greek god Zeus.
Makes sense.
Which leads him to being a very formidable opponent because he is able to do this with extreme accuracy from up to 50 yards away. So he's not one to mess with, but a drawback to his power is he generates power on, like, the best way to describe it is on the outside of his skin. Like, the power's not, like, coursing through him like many of the other students. He generates electricity on top of his skin, which leads to the fact that he is unable to interact with water, or it will severely burn him and potentially kill him if exposed to enough water.
Okay.
He's one of the few students that have one of the few kids that have a nerf to his power, so to speak. And one of the, well, not last by far, but the next one is Nichelle. She acts as a ground, just like a ground wire would in your outlet. She's able to absorb and drain the powers of the other kids.
Yeah.
Which led her to being hated by all the kids because all she's good for is torturing them and being a general nuisance. Which, kind of like some people at work. But that's everyone you meet up to book 1.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know, right? This is going to be exciting. So, after book 1, they find themselves heading to Peru because Michael's mother was not in California. So they go to Peru with help of the Voice, as they call it. A mystery man that knows that the Elgin are bad and wants to help the Electro Clan, as they call themselves, the good guys, defeat the Elgin. So they supplied him with a plane to go to Peru to essentially shut down their power plant, which is where his mother is being kept, and where they were able to meet a couple more people. They met.
Can I be honest with you?
Yes.
Don't do another character list.
Nope. No, I have to. There's more people. I'll just do the rest of them now, then explain the rest of the books after.
Okay.
Don't worry, there's not a lot more left.
I'm just so confused. That's all.
You're starting to lose me too a little bit.
After I list them off, I'll stop explaining the kids.
Okay.
Tessa, her ability is to amplify the electric children.
Okay.
Simple. Torsten, he can create microwaves. So pretty much, imagine putting a ball of tinfoil in a microwave. He can do that to you from an astonishing distance away.
They probably always make him make lunch, don't they? Sorry. Microwave joke. Sorry.
Yeah. Tanner has the ability to interfere with electrical navigation systems of aircrafts, causing them to malfunction and crash.
Okay.
His powers are so advanced that he can do this from the ground. So a plane at altitude he can take out sitting in a chair at home. Scary. And I think the last one, and probably by far the most frightening of all the children, is Casey. Her power is to contract or freeze muscles. Meaning she can stop your heart from beating, stop your brain from thinking, your lungs from breathing. And she can do this to like hundreds, maybe thousands of people at a time.
Mm.
And she's able to do this from, I think it's been a while since I read the book where she's in, but I think she's able to do this from up to 5 miles away.
Oh, wow.
And she's able to do that by, once she's able to kind of like track people's electrical patterns in their body, kind of like everyone has a thumbprint, everyone has a different electrical current in their body in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And so if she knows you and has come in contact with you, she's able to do it from a much further distance away.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not bore you with the people that are non-electric because that's not important.
It's not that you're boring me. It's just I'm just trying to follow along.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There is a lot, and it's confusing when it's all thrown at you at once. That I can agree with that.
So let's get into the plot. So they're trying to find his mother and rescue her in Peru and shut down the plant?
Yes. So the plot brings them from Pasadena to Peru. In Peru, they have information from Grace that she is in Peru, and they travel down there by the means of the Voice.
Mm-hmm.
When in Peru, they travel down some river that I don't remember the name of. A pretty prominent river that runs through the forest down in Peru, but my brain doesn't want me to remember that. And when they get there, they have to try to break in. It's like breaking into prison. There's over 2,000 guards at this one facility because at the time of them going to Peru and trying to find his mother, Hatch is taking over the Elgin from the board of directors, which he succeeds and starts being a tyrannical dictator in the name of the Elgin. But Michael and his friends make it into the plant. They find his mother, and almost everyone escapes the plant. Michael stays behind because if he didn't, they'd all get captured, kidnapped, and killed. And he is going to be his punishment for freeing his mother, who would have guessed it'd be a punishment for that, is that he is to be fed to the electrical rats. Which these rats can kill a full-size bull and strip it of everything in less than 3 seconds.
Is there like a grubby guy that's in charge of the rats? Like the rat catcher?
No. The rats are all contained inside the where they generate their electricity.
Oh, okay. So they're not like actually like an on the battle enemy. It's like they're in the facility and he'll just get like tossed into a pit.
Essentially, yeah. Their sole purpose is to generate electricity and be non-harmful to the environment. Which some of them escape, but that's not part of the plot.
Oh God.
I know. So they go to feed Michael to these rats. They don't know that Michael's able to absorb a limitless amount of electricity and absorbs all the electricity that this power plant is producing because they pretty much shoved him inside their reactor, so to speak. So with all the electricity he has in his body, he's able to now stick to metal objects like a magnet and produces a ball of lightning about the size of a basketball and throw it directly at Hatch and all the electric kids, but they got out of the way and escaped until the next book, which, or I guess, yeah, till the next book where they had to blow up they blow up a bunch of ships that the Elgin are using to be in international waters so they don't have to answer to a government and go to jail for all their various war crimes and other crimes. Book 4, they find out of this. You guys know what a savant is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Conveniently, in the book's plot, there's a Japanese girl, a savant, that found out the issue with the machine that made electric children and knows how to fix it.
Oh, wow.
So the Elgin kidnapper and Michael and his group go to, I don't remember where. It's been a while since I read that book. But they go and save her to stop Hatch from getting that information, which they obviously succeed in because it's a book. Book number 5, I believe, is... Sorry, it's about the one book that I is destroyed from rereading. Is Storm of Lightning. This is when the next 3 books all kind of fall in together as one big plot point. Hatch has taken over the island nation of Tavula or something like that. Some kind of like Hawaii, it's a bunch of atolls and islands to make up this nation. They take it over to have a base for them to do all their research and all of that. And he names one of the electric kids king of these islands to start grooming him to be the king of the world. The issue with that is, this is a book and the bad guys never win. So, it's about this time where I need to backtrack on myself because I left out some information.
Okay, well, I think that this is also a great time to jump to an ad read. So, we will be right back after this word from our sponsor.
So, what I need to backtrack on for myself is I left out a couple tidbits of information that are now relevant to the plot.
I don't think that's possible.
Yes, it is. So Michael's dad has passed away due to a heart attack before the book series began. And Michael himself has Tourette's syndrome, which could be why he's able to absorb electricity and progressively get stronger over time. But
Okay.
that's not confirmed or denied because in real world or fictional world, no one knows what causes Tourette's. But besides the point, around book 5 and 6, we start to learn a bit more about the voice.
It's actually Professor X from the X-Men, isn't it?
It is.
Sorry.
So the voice is based in Italy. He has his own compound, like where he and Casey, the one who can stop your heart from 5 miles away, are in a protected area so that no one can find them if their American facilities are compromised and taken over. And it's at the end of book 6 when we find out that the voice, spoiler alert, is Michael's dad, who was presumably dead throughout the entire series.
Oh.
Which was, when I was reading the series, this book series was still coming out, so I had to end book 6 and wait like a year for the 7th book to come out to find that fact out. And I was so conflicted, it's not even funny.
I'm sorry, but did you say they thought he had a heart attack?
They thought he faked his heart attack.
And defibrillator girl saved him. Sorry,
No.
I don't know why that's so funny to me.
Oh my god.
Defibrillator girl. Yes. I'm going to go tweet Richard Paul Evans right now and tell him to change their name.
That's what those are called, right? Where they like rub them
Yeah,
together and they zap your ass.
Yeah.
I just picture some overworked nurse that has this special power and is like pissed and is like, all right, I'll save his ass. Sorry. Anyway, go on.
That's great. So he goes into a little bit of detail explaining that he made a device that mimics a heart attack in order to go underground, so to speak, and dismantle the Elgin as best as he could with all the information he had, because he used to work for them. But after he found out all the bad that they were doing, he was like, I'm not about this, and faked his death.
Okay.
So with that plot, at the same time as this plot point's taking place, Michael and his group go to this the Elgin's new nation in the ocean to pretty much kill Hatch. That their only goal right now is to kill the big bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And in book number 6, probably one thing I want to see turn into a clip or a movie is they're all cornered, they're getting shot at from all sides because they're pretty much going against a small army at this point. And Michael climbs to the top of this radio tower, which is probably like 50 feet in the air, during this huge thunderstorm. And his whole goal is to absorb a lightning strike, which he does. And pretty much he goes supernova. He absorbs so much electricity that he was able to cause a massive explosion that turned the beaches into glass. It's how what this explosion did. It was pretty much a giant electrical explosion.
One might say a champagne supernova.
Ugh.
Sorry. I'm trying. You're not giving me things to work with for comedy here.
I know I'm not. With all of his friends are cornered on a boat or in an underground bunker, which they have on this island for convenience sake, because you can't kill all your good guys in one book. So at the end of book 6, he pretty much left thinking Michael's dead and his father just came back. That's what you're left with until book 7 comes out.
Which is not out yet.
No, it is out.
Oh.
That came out September of last year.
Okay.
I believe, or a couple years ago. In this book, and I promise this is the final book and we can move on.
It's okay.
In this book, all the Electric Kids at this point have turned to the good side. They have seen through their brainwashing of Hatch, and are now helping the Electro Clan, or the good guys, escape / pretty much try to escape with their lives, because Hatch is still alive after that giant explosion because convenience to the plot. They get to the next island down. They meet with some elder that can see visions and all these things. And he keeps insisting that they are going to see Michael again. And it's to the point where Taylor, the one who can read minds, is starting to have dreams of seeing Michael. Taylor's also his girlfriend, but that's not important. So she starts having these visions of Michael. And it gets to the point where they all have like a group vision, kind of like they're all sitting down at the hookah. And have this one huge vision where they see Michael kind of materialize in front of them and say something very vague and off-putting. With that, they get the motivation to go to this facility on the same islands and confront Hatch. They get there, they corner him, and this is the point where is probably the most far-fetched idea out of everything. Michael rematerializes into the real world, and because he absorbed so much electricity from the lightning strike, he himself became pure energy and was able to pretty much move freely anywhere into people's minds and stuff like that. He materializes in front of Hatch, looks at him, has some heroic speech, I believe, essentially snaps his fingers, and Hatch just disintegrates. He's gone. Like, dead, gone. There is no more Hatch. That's that. And then the rest of the book goes on explaining what happened when he was struck by lightning and how he thought he would die, or he thought he was dead, but he was just pure energy, and for some reason decided to go straight to this old man on the other island and start talking to him instead of going to his friends. But that's pretty much it for the books that of importance, without boring you guys anymore.
It's all good. So what would be your reason why you think people should pick up this book series?
It has a lot of comedy points and some. It's a book series that once you start reading, you can get, if you're big into books, you can get emotionally attached to the book series. I did, for example, and even when I go back and reread it, or when I'm at work listening to it as an audiobook, I still get somewhat emotional when it comes to those parts where one of the like main people dies, or like when the emotional stuff in the book happens. It targets, it's pretty much this. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's
It,
just it's a good book series. It's something that's going to pull on your heartstrings a little bit, but it's a great mix of sci-fi and a little bit of romance. Nothing's forced, and you can reread it 100 times and still find love in the book.
I gotcha. So it's got a good reread value, if you will.
Yes, I've probably reread this series like 5 or 6 times.
It's always a good marker of a good book. So are there any plans for this to be adapted to the screen? That if people are interested, they need to read the book soon?
Um, to the best of my knowledge, no. Richard Paul Evans has not said anything on adapting any of his books into screenplays, as he's still coming out with. He's still putting out a lot of good books,
Okay.
but I would love to see it hit the big screen at some point before anything on. I would love that to be the next big movie series, because I think it would be.
Yeah.
And anyone who likes sci-fi, I would immediately recommend that book series to them.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your research and development that you've done for us today, and it definitely sounds like it's something that could probably get into, just with like the different character development and things like
Yeah.
that.
I'll let you borrow my books.
Okay. I might be more interested in the. I hate to admit it, I'm kind of becoming an audiobook person, as much as I always said I would never become that way, but
Garbage.
I
I don't
know,
know.
I know.
I mean, I used to, not against it, but kind of look down on it as that, like, I read the books, you really have to listen to them. But my husband started listening to audiobooks, and it kind of made me realize people just have difficulty sitting down and reading. And Stephen, I feel like that might be part of your thing, aside from the fact that you're just super busy, and it's probably easier for you to listen while you're on the go.
Yeah. But you're
Um,
right. It also might be a little bit of like an ADHD moment where I'm just like, to dedicate that time. It's like I
yeah,
feel like I get distracted easily, and I don't. Yeah,
yeah, because I know Drew said like he could never really sit down and read. It had to be something that really grabbed his attention from the moment he started it. And I'm going to use this as a segue into my series, because one of my cousins and I got him to start the series that I'm getting ready to start talking about. And it's something he never would have been able to sit down and physically read the book,
hmm
but the audiobook part of it, he loves them. He hasn't finished everything yet, but he has actually gone out of his way time to listen to them more.
hmm.
Whereas with reading, I know he might have gotten a couple chapters in and been like, okay, this is where it.
Yeah.
So with that, if Gordon, if you don't have anything else you want to add about your series.
No, I'm pretty sure I've talked enough.
Okay. All right. So the series that I want to talk about is actually a collection of series and standalone books by my favorite author. So my favorite author is Brandon Sanderson. And the collection of books I want to talk about are his Cosmere books. So what this is at its core, a fantasy series. Basically, if he has a few other series that he's written that are not part of the Cosmere. What the Cosmere is, all of these books are set in the same universe, not necessarily on the same planet, the same system of planets that are all around each other.
Okay.
So each series or standalone book take place on planets in this universe. and hold on, let me follow my notes so that I don't get super distracted and sidetracked here, because this is really easy for me to do. Basically, there's a unique magic system present on each of the worlds, but they all share common threads with each other, that when you start to read more books set in this universe, you start to notice things that they have in common. I'll go into some of the magic systems in a few minutes, but other things that he does really well in these books, there's a lot of intrigue based on whatever that particular world's government system is. Usually that's not something that I really get into, but the way he approaches this, I really enjoyed. So like in one book series, one of the kingdoms is governed by their gods, so to speak, that are actually present in the city. In that particular book, one of the main characters is actually questioning the government system and is constantly like asking his followers, like, I don't think this is the right way to do things. I think we could find a better way to be worshiping me.
Wow.
While on the flip side of it, you have characters who believe in it so wholeheartedly. So you never have, in these books, you never have a single main character. You're usually bouncing between 3 to 4 characters, and they'll each represent one of these sections. Usually have one who is really entrenched in whatever the religious system of the world is. You'll have another one who is either part of the ruling class or is really involved in whatever the political system is. And then the third one can either be military, or sometimes there'll be something else going on in there as well. So it's a really well look at the world through all these characters. Now, he also does a lot of religious examinations of the world's faiths that he created. But you can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I got some weird feedback on my you can find some parallels to certain religions in the real world, but it's not necessarily his goal to give commentary, if that makes sense. It's just you find some parallels. Now, Brandon is a Mormon, so a lot of fans who know about that particular faith, I do not, but are familiar with that faith, have common themes and ideas. But for me personally, it's not like he's pushing his beliefs on anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Just how like your own personal values, when you're writing, they come across in your stories, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But that was something that I found kind of interesting. So let me list off for you guys the series and stand that he has. So he has the Mistborn series. Then there is so Mistborn currently has, hold on, let me turn around and look at my bookshelf and count my books real fast. Mistborn currently has 6 books published in it. Working on the 7th one, which we've been waiting for several years. I'm really, really excited for that to come out, because I have some big questions that need answers. The other major of the Cosmere is the Stormlight Archive. So Stormlight Archive currently has, that is going to be a 10-book series. And he usually puts, those are some big books. If I think about it, I'll take a picture of my shelf and I'll send it to you guys so you can get an idea of just how the size of some of these. So then you go into the standalone novels. There is Elantris and Warbreaker, which those are both, like I said, standalone, but in my mind, I consider them companions of each other. The way their stories are told, it's hard to explain without going into a lot of detail, but they're they work really well if you read one after the other, just because the ideas play well. And then he has a collection of novella that he published in a single a few years ago that is called Arcanum Unbounded. Now, the novellas are either companions, they go in between the books in the series, or they might be single short stories that go on other worlds that he hasn't written a full novel about yet. So there's a lot going on. Now, if you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details of trying to connect all the dots, you can read the books for this. I'm gonna call it the surface level plot.
Mm-hmm.
So what this is basically, the way I would break down how you could read these stories, there's 3 layers to the story. So you have your surface level plot, what is going on in that particular novel or series. So I've got a couple examples for you guys. In the Mistborn series, the very first book, this is going to sound really dry and probably kind of boring, but this is the best way I can boil it down to a really quick summary. In the Mistborn series, it begins with a street gang who has decided for various reasons that they want to take on the job of overthrowing an empire. And the series, as it goes forward, starts further because they do actually succeed. At the end of the first book, they succeed in their goal. They manage to the leader of this kingdom, who is this tyrant that they all believe, we're going to get rid of him and everything's going to get better and it's going to be great. And there was a lot going on behind the scenes than any of them realized. So your next 2 books in the Mistborn series is them realizing, getting rid of him might not have been the best idea. So you get to start finding out all of the things that he was actually doing to try and protect people from these other forces that were at work on their world. Now, Mistborn is a really interesting series because the first 3 books take place in, it's almost like an industrial Victorian style time period. Mm-hmm. When you get into the next set of books, it's considered Era 2. So this happens several generations after that first. So you have fallen into myth, and religious symbols and some of their stories have been kind of exaggerated, and you hear the characters like they use their names to swear by because they're now religious figures.
Wow.
If you've read that first era, you know what actually happened. It's a really cool examination of how events get changed and put into like a different perspective over generations of people worshiping them.
Yeah.
So when second era, this again several generations after, now you're into a steampunk Wild West type situation, which is a really, really cool world that you now find yourself in.
Yeah.
So your main character there was actually a almost like a banner sheriff type character who went out away from the city and was hunting down all these bad guys, came back to the city because he's actually a lord and now has to take care of his kingdom, or his not his kingdom, I'm sorry, his property and stuff, and he's dealing with the adjustments and some other stuff that happened. Era 3 has not yet been released, so we have the 7th book of Mistborn has to come out. That finishes up that Era 2. When we get into Era 3, so long as Brandon Sanderson doesn't come up with another idea that he wants to do in between, which tends to happen, we're going to be in. So it's going to be another really big time jump. Now, before I get much the other stories, I want to explain the magic system in Mistborn. So in Mistborn, the magic system is based around different types of metal. So if you
Avatar,
a little bit. So if you are what they consider a Mistborn in Era 1, you have all of the abilities. I'm not going to go into all of them in detail, but I'll mention a couple. Or you could be a Misting, which means that you only have one of these abilities. So if what the people do, they ingest a few flakes of these certain metals. So pewter if you, and they call it burning the metal, sort of access to the abilities it gives you. Pewter allows you to increase your strength well beyond what it should have been normally.
Mhm.
And then you have tin, which increases your senses. So your sense of sight becomes sharper, your sense of hearing increases. So those are two of the physical metals. There are other ones that let you do some really cool stuff. I can't remember. So there's steel and iron. It's, what is it? Steel. So steel allows you to, again, this is focused around metal. So this only works on other pieces of metal. If you're using steel, you can push other metals away from you. Or if you use iron, you can pull them towards you. And that's also weight based. So if you're pushing on something or pulling on something that is heavier than you, you're the thing that's going to move. If it's lighter than you, it's the thing that's going to move. So your characters had something that sounded a little bit similar to this.
Yeah, they were two of which were able to use like could become magnetic, but
Yeah.
only
So
to their size.
yeah. So it's the same base. That's a little bit of it. There's also some other metals that allow you to push and pull on people's emotions.
Huh.
So skill, because people, if you do it too much, they'll realize like something's not right, and then they can kind of snap out of your influence. So there's a lot of really cool combination that these characters can do. Now, let me see. That was about surface level of plot. So the next layer of plot that you can find in these stories, once you bypass just the story that's going on in that particular book or series, now you're getting into the Cosmere, the kind of more of the overarching plot, because you get characters who will jump from one world to another, but they usually go by different names. So you have to, if you, I mean, I'm just going to use an example for this so that it makes a little bit more sense. In one of the books, there was a character named Vasher who had a very distinct appearance. Like one of the qualities that was always, he always wore rope for a belt. It was something just really weird behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got into a completely separate series, I think it was, again, let me look at my bookshelf, make sure I'm thinking of the right one. Okay, second book in the series, of this separate series, not the one Vasher originally showed up in. There was another character shows up in the second series who's a swordmaster trainer who goes by the name of, who, I'm probably not saying that right. Part of his description was, he always wore a rope for a belt, and he used some very odd phrases that the rest of the characters are like, these don't make any sense for him to say. Like, he swore by using colors and all this other stuff, which was relevant to the world he came from.
Oh.
Had to pay attention to those details. Reading, okay, there's something weird about him, but what it is. But if you read the book where he came from and you're looking, to pay attention, you could be like, oh wait, that sounds like that. And then later in the book, towards the end, another character who is connected to him, it's a talking sword. End of the book, and you know who that sword is immediately if you've read the other book. It's like, oh, that's Nightblood. That's my favorite character right there. Okay, what's gonna happen? So it lets you kind of get into a more in-depth analysis of the books in connection with each other to keep track of those. Now, the third level, if you're paying attention and you really, really want to examine these books, the really big plot of the Cosmere, this is my best way of explaining this is, if you want to keep track of this, you better start putting up a cork board and getting yourself some, because everything is connected to everything, and you are going to look insane trying to explain it all. I remember I've spent hours sitting explaining these stories to like my mom or my cousins, and they just sit there and they let me talk, but it's like, okay, Lizette, we're never going to read this and keep track of all of that because this is too much. So one of my absolute favorite characters across the board is, his name is Hoid. Now he is another character who goes by multiple names. He is almost every single one of these books because he is a world hopper, and he is the one, if you want to know what is really going on behind the scenes, that's the character to look for. That's the character you need to pay attention to, because he has been around since the beginning events that started this whole entire thing. And to give you guys an idea of how much I love this character, one of the titles that he has, he goes by, is the King's Wit. And they usually just call him Wit. In one of the books, one of my cats is named Wit after this character. So like this, that's one of my favorites. But in order to really keep track of those type of details, you have to read and examine the chapter. At the beginning of each chapter of almost all of his books, he'll put a little inscription or a quote or part of a letter that a character is writing. And it doesn't seem like it doesn't always go with the rest of what's going on in the book, because it would be like a letter from Hoid writing to a character on another world saying, hey, I need help over here. There's something big going down, and I think it's going to affect all of us. Can you come help me? And then a couple parts or a book or so later, you'll get at the beginning of those pieces of the response letter saying, I don't trust you. You've caused too many problems, but this because something doesn't sound right. So there's that background layer going on too. Now, if any of this sounds interesting, anybody wants to go out and read this, and I'm doing a really good job of explaining stuff because there's just so much detail. I would rather you guys do some like look up kind of plot synopsis on the individual books if you're interested in them. I highly recommend them. I recommend reading them in publication order.
And
but
the first one I'm seeing is The Final Empire, correct?
That is the first book of Mistborn, yes. Now, the first book publication-wise would be Elantris. Now, the reason that I recommend them in publication order is this. Brandon Sanderson's writing style has evolved and grown very, very much since he began writing. If you start with the newer stuff, it's a higher quality of writing. It can be a little bit harder to go back and read the earlier stuff because he does this thing. It's fans refer to it as the Sanderlanche. So basically, his books have kind of a slow buildup, and at the end, it just, when it starts to go and stuff starts to happen, it's like boom, boom, boom. You do not get a second to like say, hold. When it starts moving, it does not stop. Now, over the years, he's learned to spread that out and control that. But Elantris is the best example of this. Like I said, it's a slow build. It's an interesting book, but it's kind of heavy. There's some parts that are a little difficult to get through. It deals with a little bit of mental health. There's a point is considering suicide because of situation that he finds himself in. So I mean, there's a little bit, he touches on some really difficult matter, and I personally think he does it really well, especially in one of the later books, which I'm going to discuss in a moment.
Hey, real quick,
yes,
can you circle back to that sentence and redo it and just say unalive? Like,
say it. Where do I need to get back?
Just go back to just like lead in and be like, they deal with mental health. And
okay.
And when you get to that part of just say unalive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. No,
you're
good.
Fine.
So one of he deals with mental illness with actually several of his books, and in Elantris it deals with some heavy subject matter, and we'll just kind of leave it at that. And sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
You're, you're good. Thinking about that. But yeah, so with Elantris, it's a slow build up until about the last 100 pages or so, at which point that's where the action comes in. That's actually one of the only book of his that I managed to convince my mom to read, because I don't know if I had ever told you this or not, Stephen. She and I would trade books back and forth a lot.
Oh yeah.
And she tended to read more action adventure. She didn't really get into fantasy as much because that just wasn't as much of her thing. But I kept telling her, "You need to read this. I think you'll really like it. This is my favorite author." So I got her to read that one, and it took her a while to get through it because again, it was kind of slow. And I like it. It's just I have to keep putting it down and reading something else for a little bit and then coming back to it. But she really enjoyed it. So it is something, even if it doesn't quite sound exactly like your cup of tea, I do recommend people check it out.
Okay.
Now, going back to a little bit of the mental illness stuff, flipping over to the Stormlight Archive series. This is one of my favorites. Now, this recently the fourth book was published last year, I believe it was. Yes, because it was in the middle of the pandemic. Some people have gotten a little bit of I can't think of the word I want. Conflicting opinions. That's what it is. Conflicting opinions because of how heavily this series in particular deals with mental illness. So the author did a lot of research into the different things that he's writing about. So alongside of all of the other themes that this book deals with a lot, this one deals with some particularly heavy topics. So we have, and Stephen, stop me if I use it. I'm going to try and be more conscious of some of the terms.
Okay.
But stop me if I use one that I need to replace. So we have a character who deals with depression and all of the things that are involved with that. We have a character who deals with PTSD, who deals with dissociative identity disorder, which, if you guys aren't familiar with that term, it used to be called multiple personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And a few of the things. So part of why mental illness is such a big part of this series, the magic system on this world only works if you have been broken. So you have, it could be just a minor trauma or something, but you have to have gone through something to be able to access the magic on this world, because it's made through a bond with another creature, and they can only create on through the so-called cracks from you being broken. So
wow.
One thing that I really like that he does with this is when they start to develop these abilities in this system or in this world, it doesn't magically fix them. So it's like, oh, I have magic powers now. My depression went away. Oh, I have magic powers now. All my problems are gone. No.
I love that.
Yeah, it's so well done. Now, this is something that some people are having some trouble. Gonna circle back to that character who has depression. He's one of my favorites in the series. He's one of my cousin's favorites. His name is Kaladin. Now, he goes through some shit, man. Like, he deals with a lot. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to spoil anything. But in the first book, it's a really downhill slope for him. And then he finds some motivation and starts to be like, you know what? Things are going to be good. Second book rolls around. Something happens. he goes back into a downward slump and is like, you know what? People just suck. Nobody's going to blah, blah. At the end of that book, he kind of starts to come out of it again. By the time you reach the fourth book, he is one of his lowest points. And this was so hard for me to read because of having dealt with some of these same issues myself. Because it was so well written and it just hit home so hard. But it was written with such respect and such love and such care that, like, I have so much respect, and I love this author so much for putting the things right. Now, some of the fans haven't dealt with depression. I've seen a lot of complaints of people saying, why isn't he over? Which is some complaints that a lot of people who deal with these things get in real life. So it's opened up good discussions in this Facebook group that I'm a part of for this series. A lot of people saying, like, you know, we understand what you're saying. We understand that it's hard, but that's what part of this illness is. It way entirely, you learn to overcome it. And this character is doing, he's learning to overcome it slowly. So it's a very powerful narrative.
He's starting, like, he's opening the floor to discussion, normalization of these issues, and kind of breaking stigma in a sense.
Particularly in fantasy series, because a common theme or a common thing that tends to happen in fantasy series is you might have a character who is dealing with this stuff, but as soon as they get that magical ability or that magic item, it's like they forgot that they have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
True.
Like, it fixes it immediately, and it's like, that's not how this is being written. So, like I said, it's difficult to read at times just because it is such heavy material, but the payoff at the end of it is so worth it. And the fact, like you said, that he's breaking through some stigmas is really freaking cool. So let me switch over to a little bit more lighthearted topic now that we've discussed that. Sorry, I'm skimming through my notes here because I have jumped all over the place, even though I had my outline. Another thing that he does really well is well-written female characters, which is not always easy for male writers to do. There's a lot of jokes going around the internet right now about, like, male writers and how they write their female characters, and even ones who think that they're not that bad. Messages out of their books and showing, like, it's not good. It's not good.
What's the term that they use for, like, the female protagonist that has no flaws? It's like a Sally Sue or Mary Sue.
Or Mary Sue. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. They're, like, flawless and all, like, you know, Captain Marvel from Marvel. But yeah, sorry, go on.
You're fine. So most of his female characters, now I'm not saying that they couldn't use a bit more development here and there, but I wouldn't ever consider any of his characters, period, really, to be flat. They have depth. They all have they have character flaws, but they also have really good character strengths. Like, they're pretty well rounded. So some of his female characters are written to be extremely intelligent or funny or witty or sensual, or he has one that is asexual. They can be awkward, they're confident, like, you get that entire array. So that's something I haven't seen too much in books written by male authors, especially in the type of setting that we're going into with his books. And I'll give you guys a real quick synopsis or a quick summary of some of the magic systems, and then I'll be done. So In Warbreaker, the magic system, one of them is based around colors. So as an artist, that was just something that really captured my imagination, something that I found really interesting. So people can absorb kind of some of the world around them and use that to bring inanimate objects to life with commands. And like, so that's why that one character I mentioned earlier, Vasher, has a rope belt, because and use a command and tell that rope belt hold things, and they can throw it at somebody that he's fighting, and that rope around them, and they won't be able to get out of it.
That's
wow.
awesome.
So that's the magic system there. There's a lot of different things that you can do. What that magic system is called is biochromatic breath. Now, I talked about Mistborn. Sorry, I'm just again going down my bookshelf here. Stormlight Archive is one of the evolved magic systems. So there are the number 10 is really important in that series. That's the one that I said there's going to be 10 books in that series. 10 is a reoccurring number across the book series. So one of the groups in that book is called the Knights Radiant. There are 10 different of the knights. There are 10 different abilities that the different knights can have. So each order of knight has access to 2 of the abilities. So they all overlap with each other. And I'm just going to go back to Kaladin because he's my favorite character. So he is a member of the Wind Runners. And the Wind Runners abilities, all of these abilities are based off of Stormlight, which is there are these huge storms that roll just across the planet, and if you set out gemstones out in one of these storms, they will absorb it. It's not quite lightning. I think there's more to this Stormlight that we haven't but gemstones will absorb it, and then these Knights Radiant can absorb that light out of the gemstone, and that is what powers their abilities. So Kaladin's abilities are, again, kind of like Mistborn, pushing and pulling the way that those metals worked, but instead they're not based around a particular material. He can kind of change the gravitational pull that something. So he can, it's called lashing, is the term that's used in the book. Lash himself upward slightly and can then use that to fly. Okay. So it's a really creative, like, and you finding creative ways to use these abilities. Now, one of the other characters I really like, her name is Shallan. She's a light weaver. She can create illusions that would fool just about like anybody. Like they're solid, like almost solid projections, kind of.
I gotcha.
So there's a lot of really, really neat stuff. We haven't seen all of the abilities yet because they're still finding members of others. Okay. There's so much more that is involved in that whole entire world and magic system that I could at for days. So we're just gonna leave it at that. But if any of that sounds interesting, I really, really recommend that series. If you don't want to read publication order, because like I said, I know the earlier books are kind of slow. Mm-hmm. I recommend starting if you need something that's your interest, then I recommend starting with the Mistborn series. Work through Mistborn, hop back, do a couple of the standalones, and then go into Stormlight Archive, just because there are so many moving parts in Stormlight Archive that you have to at least somewhat keep track of. You want to be familiar with his writing style before you get to that series, just because it's so involved. But let me see. I think that's where I'm gonna leave it, just because I don't want to drag this more. But one last thing with all of his writing, it's something that while it is mostly in the adult fantasy section,
Hmm.
I wouldn't consider it inappropriate for like middle grade readers. Like I would be comfortable giving it to like an 11, 12 year old. There might be some themes, like some of the heavier ones, I might wait until they were in, but there are like Mistborn and a few of the standalones, I think like middle school age children would be able to handle.
Hmm.
There's nothing like explicit in them.
Yeah.
So it's definitely serious. I have recommended it many times while working at the bookstore.
Well, I definitely have to say the way you put that together definitely has my interest peaked, and I may or may not have an audiobook saved to my watch later. So,
I'm definitely
Yeah,
going to want to go over these books. They sound amazing.
yeah.
there, I mean, my best friend in high school is who introduced me to him. She gave me PDF files of the Mistborn because at the time we didn't really have money, a lot of books, and we feel bad about it now, so we buy stuff. But we had to do what we had to do in school.
Hmm.
They are in talks about making movies or TV shows about some of these. I don't know how far into development they've gotten. I think they've yes, we've sold rights or we're in talks stage. They
Okay.
haven't made it much further yet, but it is something that a lot of fans are both excited and nervous about
Mhm.
because some of these powers aren't going to translate to the screen very well because some of them are a little bit more internal.
Mm.
But if they were to do it in like an animated style, I personally feel like that would be the best way to do it, but that's just me. Um, at least right now, if they're not going to give them like a huge budget. So I'm keeping an eye on that for the future. And if you're looking for an author who also puts out a lot of books that are always good quality, this man writes like 2 to 3 a year, if not more, depending on what he's got going on. He is a writing machine. I don't know
Wow.
how he has insomnia and just writes at night while his kids are asleep.
Huh.
Um, but yeah, he this is I think we're going in stretches of not really having too many books of his published just because he was writing one of the larger books and now he's
Ah,
going back to writing some of the smaller ones. So
I gotcha.
Nice.
Well, yeah, I definitely have to say I think my interest is peaked in both of these series, and I think I'm going to be checking them out.
I definitely want to check them out too.
Hmm.
yeah,
Well,
I'm gonna be looking into his books. So
well, I want to say for those listening, please, you know, drop us a comment. Let us know, like, have you read any of these books? Have you, or any of these on your list because of us, like your reading list for the future? Did we maybe make our way onto your list? Because we would love to hear that. Give us any feedback you have. If we missed anything or messed anything up, definitely let us know. But aside from that, guys, I think that's probably a wrap for today's show.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd say so too. This is definitely going to be a longer episode, so thank you for sticking around as long as you have.
Yeah, this might be our longest episode yet. So yeah, we appreciate you still sticking it out with us, and hopefully we got some good recommendations out there for you. And with that being said, guys, we will see you in the next episode. Let's Be Nerds is hosted and executive produced by Gordon Bryant and me, Stephen J. McLean. Today's co-host was Lizette Ayala. You can find her on Instagram at xshadowsongx. Let's Be Nerds is a production of Speak Easily Productions. Our social media manager is Kylie Gregg. Our theme song was composed by Robert Van Jacobs. You can follow him on Instagram at Bobby_Spector. To keep up with the latest about the show, follow us on Twitter at Let's the Letter B Nerds, or join our Discord server, which will be linked in the description box below. Thank you to Anchor for sponsoring our show, and thank you for listening.